What's up everyone, Kashi here and welcome to episode 2 of Ignition and Beyond and part 2 to the Engine Basics video collection. In this episode, we're going to be continuing on about what we talked about last video and dive into some of the common modifications that you can do to improve your stock air intake system. Let's do this. Alright, so in this video, just to keep things simple, I'm only going to talk about naturally aspirated engines, but don't worry, I will get into forced induction in a future video. Now in the last episode of Ignition and Beyond, I mentioned how in order to make more power, your engine needs to be able to burn more air and more fuel. So the purpose of all these air intake modifications that I'm going to talk about in this video will be to get the maximum possible amount of air into your engine. So the first modification that we're going to be talking about would be a high performance drop-in air filter. What it does is it replaces your factory restrictive air filter for a higher flowing one that allows more air to flow past it easier and enter your engine. Now in the last video, I briefly explained the steps to replacing your air filter as regular maintenance. Well, it's the same process with installing a performance filter, making it an extremely easy modification to install. So here is an AFE Power Magnum Flow Pro 5R air filter for a Chevrolet Camaro SS from 2016 to 2019. And as you can see, it only costs around 80 bucks. Now in terms of car parts, 80 bucks is probably about the cheapest that you're gonna get. In addition, whereas a stock filter has to be replaced every 20 to 25,000 kilometers, a performance drop-in air filter can actually be washed and reused multiple times. So it's cheap, easy to install, and can actually save you some money in the long run. That, coupled with the fact that it delivers better performance, makes a performance drop-in air filter one of the best first modifications that you can do to your car. Now if you want to take things a step further, maybe try something a little more daunting, you may want to go with a cold air or short ram air intake. A short ram intake replaces your design of having an air inlet, air box, and all this piping in place of a higher flowing cone-shaped filter and a shorter, less restrictive air pipe. Because the distance air needs to travel is shorter and smoother, this allows air an easier path to get into your engine. This improved airflow can achieve better throttle response and a small gain in power. A colder intake, which is designed similarly to a short ram intake, relocates the position of your air filter. When your air filter is close to your engine, the air passing through it absorbs a lot of your engine's heat. A colder intake, on the other hand, moves your filter far away from your engine, maybe say behind your grill or behind a vent, somewhere where it can get cooler, denser air. But what do I mean by denser air? Well, in order to understand that, we're going to have to go back and take a look at some middle school science. Now, the 5 statements of particle theory state that all matter is made of particles. There are empty spaces in between particles. Particles are always in movement. When you add heat to particles, they gain energy, move faster, and spread out from one another. And finally, particles of the same substance attract to one another. Now focus on statements 2, 3, and 4 because those will help us understand how cold air intakes work. So if we take a look at these two diagrams, the first represents a warm gas and the second represents a cooler gas. In the warmer gas, particles are moving a lot faster and are a lot more spread out from one another. On the other hand, with the cooler gas, particles are moving a lot slower and are a lot closer together, so your particles are a lot more bunched up. So you got more particles in the same amount of space, or you could say more mass in the same amount of volume. And since density is just mass over volume, we can say that cold air is more dense. And because your engine would be able to burn more oxygen particles in the same amount of space, colder air would increase your engine's horsepower. Now, performance drop-in air filters, cold air, and short ram intakes are all great modifications, but on their own, the most they would be able to get you would be, say, 1 or 2 extra horsepower. And the reason for that is because you can't only increase the amount of air entering your engine and leave it at that. However, a performance intake coupled with an ECU tune is extremely effective. Now, in the previous episode, I explained how your ECU or engine control unit is basically the computer that controls all of your car's functions. Now, when we say tuning or reflashing your ECU, it basically means adjusting its calibrations. So, to accompany the extra air entering your engine with a performance intake, you would tune your ECU to add more fuel, change around your timing, and other variables in order to make your modification effective. Now, if you're worried about the cost and complexity of going to a dyno and getting a professional tune, don't worry. There are dozens of companies like Cop Tuning, Hondata, and K-Tuner that offer cheaper, DIY-friendly ECU tuning solutions. A performance filter or intake coupled with an ECU tune can get you 5, 6, maybe even 10 extra horsepower, along with better acceleration and some sick intake noises. I strongly recommend a performance filter, short ram, or colder intake system as a first modification for anyone who wants to begin modifying cars. So that's enough talk about high performance filters and intake systems. Let's move on to higher flowing throttle bodies. A higher performance throttle body would be larger in diameter, allowing for more air to flow past and enter your engine. So here we have an NWP Engineering Performance Throttle Body Kit for a 2003 to 2006 Nissan 350Z. Now this performance throttle body has a diameter of 75 millimeters, which is a 5 millimeter increase over the 70 millimeter throttle body that comes from the factory. Because 75 is 7% more than 70, theoretically, this performance throttle body should allow for 7% more air to flow past it and enter your engine. Now I know some of y'all might be wondering, what about ITBs or individual throttle bodies? Now I'm not going to get into ITBs in this episode, but don't worry, I will have a future video dedicated entirely to ITBs. And finally, we've reached the last modification of the video, a higher performance intake manifold. So if you take a look at the intake runners on this Kia Rondo, you can see that they're rather narrow. So air is going to have a hard time working its way through these runners and getting into your engine, especially at higher speeds. A performance intake manifold would use smoother internal walls and curves as well as wider passageways to allow for better airflow. So here is an OEM Acura Integra intake manifold, and here is a Skunk 2 performance intake manifold featuring smoother contours and wider passageways to allow for better unrestricted airflow so that you can make more horsepower. And there you go. That is a complete guide to the common modifications that you can do to improve your stock air intake system. So we talked about performance drop-in filters, short ram and colder intakes, higher flowing throttle bodies, and higher performance intake manifolds. If you're just a beginner like me and you're just getting started with modifying cars, I would really recommend starting off with a performance drop-in air filter, short ram, or cold air intake as they're fairly cheap and easy to install. On the other hand, performance throttle bodies and manifolds are more complex and more expensive, but if you're up for the challenge, go for it. They can get exceptional power gains. However, it is recommended that you get a professional tune to keep everything running safely and to get the best out of your modifications. And again, I know I didn't talk about ITBs in this episode, But don't worry, I will have a future video dedicated entirely to ITBs. So I hope y'all found the video enjoyable, interesting, and useful. In the next episode, I'm going to be covering how your engine's fuel system works. So if I made any mistakes in any of my information, or I left out something important, feel free to drop a comment below. Thank you guys so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see y'all next time. Once again,